The Galactic Council chamber stretched like a vast metallic dome above the gathered representatives. Hundreds of different species filled the circular seats, their various forms creating a rainbow of colors and shapes against the dark walls. Some floated in special gas containers, others perched on crystal formations, and a few required mechanical suits just to survive in the shared atmosphere. Admiral Vextal stood at the center podium, his 4 muscular arms moving with practiced precision as he activated the holographic display. The massive projection materialized above them all, a dark, menacing space station that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The structure was enormous, easily the size of a small moon, with countless weapon ports bristling from its surface like deadly spines. "Behold Nexus Prime," the Admiral announced, his voice carrying through the chamber's translation systems in dozens of different languages. For 100 standard years, this fortress has been the crown jewel of the hegemony's military might. Every species in this chamber has lost ships trying to breach its defenses. A low murmur rippled through the assembled delegates. The crystalline Cathari chimed nervously, their bodies flickering with worried light patterns. The gas-form Valians swirled with anxious colors, while the insectoid Thrax clicked their mandibles in agitation. "Our intelligence networks have confirmed the worst," Vextal continued, manipulating the hologram to show the station's internal structure. "Nexus Prime houses a weapon capable of destroying entire star systems. The hegemony calls it the System Killer, a device that can destabilize a sun and cause it to go supernova." The chamber erupted in alarmed sounds. Species that had been enemies for centuries suddenly found themselves united in fear. The implications were staggering. No world would be safe if the hegemony could destroy entire solar systems at will. 17 separate assault fleets have attempted to destroy this station, the Admiral said grimly. The Cortan Empire sent their entire navy, over 3,000 ships. They lost 90% of their forces before retreating. The Nexari Confederation tried a stealth approach with their best commandos. None returned. Even the Zephyrian war machines built specifically for siege warfare could not penetrate the station's defenses. The hologram shifted to show tactical displays of the failed attacks. Each assault had been carefully planned, using the best military minds and most advanced technology available. Each had ended in devastating defeat. "The station's defenses are beyond anything we have encountered," Vextal explained. "Automated defense grids with quantum targeting systems that can track and destroy thousands of targets simultaneously. Missile batteries that fire projectiles capable of punching through any known armor. Energy shields that have withstood direct hits from planet cracker bombs. And surrounding it all, a fleet of 10,000 unmanned fighter craft, each one programmed with combat algorithms perfected over decades of warfare." A delegate from the aquatic Merhai species raised a webbed hand. "What are our tactical options, Admiral?" Vextal's expression grew even grimmer. "Our best strategic minds have run every possible scenario through our most advanced computers. The mathematical probability of a successful assault is calculated at 0.001%. In practical terms, this means certain death for any force attempting to attack Nexus Prime." The chamber fell silent. The weight of the situation pressed down on everyone present. If the hegemony could not be stopped, every world in the galaxy would live under the threat of instant annihilation. "The hegemony has given us an ultimatum," Vextal announced. "Surrender unconditionally within 1 standard month, or they will demonstrate the System Killer's power on an inhabited world. Based on their communications, they have selected the Altair system, home to over 4 billion civilians." In the back corner of the chamber, in a section reserved for the newest council members, a small bipedal figure stood up. The creature was relatively tiny compared to most of the other species present, standing barely 2 meters tall on 2 legs. Its skin was a pale pinkish color, and it had only 2 arms and a head covered in dark fur. "Admiral," the figure called out in a clear voice. The translation system identified the speaker as Ambassador Hana Kim from the planet Earth. Vextal looked surprised. The humans had joined the Galactic Council only 5 years ago after achieving faster-than-light travel. Most species considered them primitive newcomers who had little to contribute to galactic affairs. "Yes, Ambassador Kim." Vexital replied politely. Could you provide more specific details about the defensive systems? I want to understand exactly what we're facing. Several delegates turned to stare at the human. The Thrax delegate clicked dismissively, while a Corton officer snorted with derision. What could this primitive species possibly contribute to a problem that had stumped the greatest military minds in the galaxy? The specifics are quite technical, Vextal said carefully. Are you certain your species would understand the complexity? Hana Kim smiled, an expression that somehow made several nearby species instinctively step back. There was something unsettling about the way the human's facial features arranged themselves, something that suggested hidden depths beneath the seemingly simple exterior. Admiral, she said, her voice carrying a strange confidence that filled the vast chamber. Suicidal odds are exactly the kind of mission humanity specializes in. The chamber buzzed with confused translations as delegates tried to understand what the human had just said. But in the back of the room, Ambassador Kim remained standing, that unnerving smile still fixed on her face, as if she knew something the rest of the galaxy had yet to learn. 3 weeks after the Galactic Council meeting, the military leaders of dozens of species gathered at Kepler Station, the largest military base in the Outer Rim. The station was a massive structure built into an asteroid, with docking bays that could accommodate the largest warships in the galaxy. Today, those bays were filled with an unusual sight. The human fleet had arrived. Admiral Vextal stood on the observation deck staring out at the collection of ships that floated in the station's main docking area. His 4 eyes blinked in confusion as he tried to make sense of what he was seeing. This was not what anyone had expected. Are you certain these are military vessels? Asked General Corax of the Cytherian Empire, his insectoid features twisted in puzzlement. The human ships were unlike anything in the known galaxy. Some were clearly converted cargo haulers, their hulls patched with mismatched metal plates. Others appeared to be mining vessels, still equipped with drilling equipment and ore processors. A few looked like they had been built from the remains of several different ships welded together in ways that defied all engineering logic. According to the manifest, they have brought 200 ships, reported the station's commander, a crystalline being whose voice chimed like bells. But many of them do not match any known warship classification. Captain Minho Park of the Earth Defense Force entered the briefing room where the alien commanders had gathered. He was a tall man with graying hair and scars on his hands that spoke of years of hard service. Behind him walked a dozen other humans, all wearing simple gray uniforms that looked almost primitive compared to the elaborate armor and ceremonial dress of the other species. Gentlemen, ladies, and honored beings, Minho said, nodding to the assembled commanders. Thank you for allowing us to participate in this operation. General Corax clicked his mandibles impatiently. Captain Park, we were expecting a proper military fleet. What you have brought appears to be a collection of civilian vessels and outdated ships. Minho smiled. That's exactly what they are. The room fell silent. Several commanders exchanged glances, wondering if the translation systems had malfunctioned. I do not understand, said Admiral Zethra of the Aquatic Coalition, her gills fluttering with confusion. You brought civilian ships to attack the most heavily defended station in the galaxy? The key to destroying Nexus Prime isn't overwhelming firepower, Minho explained, activating a holographic display that showed the human fleet's composition. It's controlled chaos. The display revealed the true nature of the human plan. Each ship had been modified in ways that made no sense to conventional military thinking. Cargo vessels had been fitted with ramming prows. Mining ships carried massive drilling equipment pointed forward like weapons. Some ships appeared to have their engines installed backward. General Corax studied the display with growing alarm. Captain, your proposed strategy appears to be completely insane. That's exactly the point, Minho replied calmly. Every species in this galaxy thinks logically. You calculate odds, minimize losses, and maximize efficiency. Your military academies teach the same basic principles of warfare that have been used for thousands of years. He gestured to the hologram, highlighting different aspects of the human fleet. The hegemony's artificial intelligence was designed to counter that kind of thinking. It has studied every battle fought by every species in this council. It knows how you think, how you plan, how you attack. Admiral Vextal leaned forward with interest. And you believe your chaotic approach will confuse their systems? More than confuse them, Minho said. We're going to break them. See, humans have been fighting impossible odds for our entire history. We've had to develop tactics that don't make sense to anyone else, including ourselves sometimes. The human captain walked around the room, making eye contact with each alien commander. These aren't our best ships. They're our most expendable, ones crewed by volunteers who have already survived situations that should have killed them. Volunteers? Admiral Zethra asked. They know this is likely a suicide mission? Every single one of them volunteered, Minho confirmed. We told them the odds. We explained that most of them probably wouldn't come back, and we had more volunteers than we could use. The alien commanders struggled to understand this concept. In their cultures, military service was either a duty or a career. The idea of volunteers for a suicide mission was foreign to them. But why would they do this? General Corax asked. Minho was quiet for a moment, then smiled grimly. Because someone has to. Because 4 billion people in the Altair system are going to die if we don't try. And because humans have a saying, someone has to be crazy enough to try the impossible or it never gets done. He turned back to the display, showing the chaotic formations the human fleet would use. Your species fight with honor and precision. Humans fight to win no matter how ugly it gets. We've been doing it since we were throwing rocks at each other in caves. Admiral Vextal studied the human captain with new interest. You intentionally choose inefficient tactics? When every conventional approach has failed, unconventional becomes the only option left, Minho explained. The hegemony's computers can predict what logical military minds will do. They can't predict what desperate humans will try. The room was silent as the alien commanders processed this information. Finally, General Corax spoke. This plan violates every principle of military strategy I have ever learned. Minho grinned. Good. That means it might actually work. The human fleet approached Nexus Prime in a formation that would have made any military academy instructor resign in disgust. Ships flew in seemingly random patterns, some moving backward while firing forward, others spinning like children's toys while their weapons blazed. A converted mining vessel actually performed barrel rolls while its drilling equipment somehow functioned as weapons. On the bridge of the human command ship, Lieutenant Commander Aaron Cho watched the chaos unfold with the calm expression of someone who had seen this kind of madness work before. Her tactical display showed friendly ships as green dots moving in patterns that looked like a child scribbling. But she knew every seemingly random movement was part of a larger plan that only humans could understand. Falcon Wing. This is Control. Aaron spoke into her headset. Time to initiate the Crazy Ivan maneuver. Copy that, Control. Going full stupid, came the cheerful reply from Lieutenant Kim Tae, whose converted cargo hauler was already beginning to fly in a figure-8 pattern while firing in all directions at once. The hegemony's artificial intelligence, which had successfully predicted and countered 17 previous assaults from the galaxy's best military minds, began experiencing what humans would recognize as a complete system overload. Every time it calculated an optimal response to the human tactics, the humans would do something completely different, something that made no logical sense whatsoever. The AI's processors worked frantically, trying to find patterns in the chaos. It analyzed the approach vectors, weapon firing sequences, and ship movements, searching for the underlying strategy. But there was no strategy in any conventional sense. The humans were simply making things up as they went along, and somehow, it was working. Nexus Prime is firing quantum missiles, reported Ensign Park from the sensor station, his voice steady despite the fact that each of those missiles could destroy a battleship. Perfect, Aaron grinned, the expression making her look slightly unhinged. All units, execute Plan Zulu. What followed was a maneuver so completely insane that the alien observers watching from a safe distance couldn't decide whether to be terrified or impressed. Instead of dodging the incoming missiles, the human ships actively flew toward them, using their own explosions to create a massive cloud of debris and energy that masked the approach of smaller vessels. Control, this is Hammer Squadron, came, a voice over the radio, barely audible through static. We're officially dead in the water, but somehow we're also inside their outer perimeter. How is that even possible? Don't question it, Hammer. Just light them up, Aaron replied, watching as the supposedly destroyed ships continued to fire weapons from inside the debris cloud. The hegemony's defense systems had been designed to handle coordinated attacks from organized fleets. They were not prepared for ships that pretended to be destroyed while continuing to fight, or for tactics that seemed to be invented on the spot by people who clearly had no regard for their own safety. A converted civilian transport called Lucky Strike somehow managed to ram through an energy shield that should have been impenetrable, its captain apparently having decided that if the shield couldn't be shot down, maybe it could be headbutted into submission. The transport exploded on impact, but not before its crew managed to plant charges that created a gap in Nexus Prime's defenses. "This is Torpedo Team 7, came another transmission. This one from a small ship that looked like it had been built from spare parts. "We're flying through the hole that Lucky Strike made. The good news is we're inside their defenses. The bad news is everything is on fire, and we're pretty sure our navigation system is actually a coffee maker." "Outstanding work, 7. Can you reach the primary weapon arrays?" "Well, we're definitely going to hit something. Whether it's the weapon arrays or just a really big wall remains to be seen." The battle continued in this chaotic fashion for hours. Human ships performed maneuvers that violated basic physics, fired weapons in sequences that made no tactical sense, and somehow continued fighting even after taking damage that should have destroyed them completely. The hegemony's automated defense systems, faced with this unprecedented chaos, began making increasingly desperate attempts to restore order to the battle. But order was exactly what the humans refused to provide. Every time the AI thought it had figured out what the humans were trying to do, they would do something else entirely. A group of mining ships began using their drilling equipment to bore directly through Nexus Prime's hull, while their crews sang what appeared to be ancient Earth war songs over the radio. A converted passenger liner somehow managed to dock with the station's main hangar, despite the fact that the hangar was supposed to be sealed and defended by automated turrets. "Control, this is Ground Team Alpha," came a new voice, crackling with static. "We're inside the station. Repeat, we have boots on the ground inside Nexus Prime." Aaron looked at her tactical display in amazement. According to every computer simulation, it should have been impossible for ground teams to board the station. But there they were, somehow inside the most heavily defended fortress in the galaxy. "How did you get in there, Alpha?" "Well, it turns out that if you crash your ship into their docking bay hard enough, the doors just sort of open up. Who knew?" The human assault continued, each impossible success building on the last as chaos slowly but surely overcame the hegemony's perfect order. Inside Nexus Prime, the corridors echoed with sounds that the station's builders had never expected to hear. Human voices, speaking in their strange language mixed with the noise of boots on metal floors and the occasional explosion from improvised weapons. The hegemony had designed their fortress to repel coordinated military assaults from organized armies, not small groups of humans with demolition charges and absolutely no regard for proper military procedure. Sergeant Major Jun-Ho Lee crouched behind a twisted piece of debris, studying the massive support beam that stretched across the corridor like a metal tree trunk. His team of 12 soldiers waited behind him, their faces blackened with smoke and their uniforms torn from the fighting. They had been inside the station for 2 hours now, moving through maintenance tunnels and service corridors that the original designers had assumed would never see combat. "Sir, I've finished the structural analysis," reported Corporal Yoon, a young woman whose engineering background had made her invaluable during the mission. She held a small device that beeped and flashed as it scanned the massive beam. "If we can destroy this support structure, it will cause a cascade failure in the primary weapons array. Half of their main guns will collapse." Junho examined the beam carefully. It was roughly the size of a small building, made from some kind of ultra-strong metal that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Even with all their explosives, it would be difficult to damage. "How much explosive material do we need?" he asked. Yoon checked her calculations again, her face growing pale. "More than we have, sir. We'd need at least 3 times our current supply of charges, and even then the blast would be so powerful that it would collapse this entire section." Of the station. What does that mean for anyone in the area? It means anyone within a kilometer of here would be killed instantly, sir. The team fell silent. They all understood what this meant. They could complete their mission and save billions of lives in the Altair system, but it would cost them their own lives in the process. Junho activated his communication device. Control, this is Ground Team Alpha. We have a situation. The voice of Lieutenant Commander Aaron Cho came through clearly despite the interference. Go ahead, Alpha. We can disable their primary weapons array, but it's going to be a one-way trip. The explosion needed to take out the support beam will kill anyone in this section. There was a long pause. Then Captain Minho Park's voice came, over the radio, steady and calm. Sergeant Major, do you have family waiting for you at home? Junho thought of his wife So-young, who worked as a teacher in Seoul, and their 7-year-old daughter Mina, who always ran to the door when he came. Home from missions? Yes, sir. Wife and daughter. Then make it count. Junho looked at his team. These were soldiers who had volunteered for a mission they knew was probably suicide. They had left behind families, friends, and futures because someone had to try to stop the hegemony. Now they faced the final choice. Listen up, everyone, Junho said quietly. Anyone who wants to leave can go now. Find another way out of the station. No one will think less of you. This is not an order. It's a choice. Private Song, barely 19 years old, shifted nervously. Sir, what are our chances of finding another way to complete the mission? Honestly, close to 0. This is our best shot at stopping them. The young soldier nodded. Then I'm staying. One by one, each member of the team made the same choice. Corporal Yoon, who had a husband and twin boys at home. Private Nam, whose parents had sacrificed everything to send him to military academy. Sergeant Kim, who had planned to retire next year and open a small restaurant. Not a single soldier moved toward the exit. All right then, Junho said, pulling the pins from his remaining grenades. For the record, I want it noted that we could have done this the smart way, found some clever solution that would have saved everyone. But where's the fun in that? The team laughed, despite the situation. It was a bitter laugh, but genuine. They had come this far by doing things the hard way, the human way. Why stop now? Corporal Yoon began setting up the explosives while the rest of the team established a perimeter. They worked quickly and efficiently, each person knowing their job without needing detailed orders. This was what humans did best: improvise, adapt, and get the job done no matter what the cost. Charges are set, Yoon reported. We have 3 minutes. Junho keyed his radio one last time. Control, this is Ground Team Alpha. Charges are armed. Tell our families we did this for them. Copy that, Alpha. Your sacrifice will be remembered. The explosion tore through Nexus Prime's superstructure, like a lightning bolt made of fire and metal. The massive support beam cracked, twisted, and finally collapsed, taking 3 entire weapons arrays with it. The blast created a breach in the station's hull that the remaining human fleet immediately exploited, pouring through the gap like water through a broken dam. But Sergeant Major Junho Lee and his team were already moving toward their next target, somehow having survived the impossible once again. Because that's what humans did. They found a way to make the impossible merely improbable, and then they did it anyway. 6 hours after the human assault began, something unprecedented happened in the history of galactic warfare. Nexus Prime, the fortress that had stood unconquered for a century, sent out a surrender signal. The massive space station that had been considered absolutely impregnable was now broadcasting its defeat to every ship in the area. The signal came as a series of blinking lights along the station's hull, followed by a transmission in the standard galactic language. This is Nexus Prime Command. We surrender unconditionally. Repeat, we surrender unconditionally. Please cease all attacks. In the human command ship, Lieutenant Commander Aaron Cho stared at her tactical display in amazement. The screen showed Nexus Prime's weapon systems going offline one by one, its shields powering down and its fighter squadrons returning to their docking bays. Around the station, the scattered remains of the human fleet floated like debris, many ships barely holding together, but somehow still functional. Did we actually win? asked Ensign Park, his voice filled with disbelief. Looks like it, Erin replied, shaking her head in wonder. Send the word to all ships. Mission accomplished. Nexus Prime has surrendered. The celebration that followed was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. Human crews, many of them wounded and floating in damaged ships, began cheering over their IU radio channels. Some sang songs, others told jokes, and a few simply laughed with the kind of hysteria that comes from surviving something that should have killed them. But the real amazement came from the alien observers who had watched the entire battle from a safe distance. Admiral Vextal stood on the bridge of his flagship, all four of his eyes focused on the tactical display that showed the impossible victory. The species that the Galactic Council had considered barely advanced enough for membership had accomplished what the greatest military minds in the galaxy had deemed impossible. How? Was all the Admiral could manage to say. In the aftermath of the battle, as rescue ships moved through the debris field to collect human survivors, the galaxy began to understand what had really happened. The hegemony's perfect artificial intelligence, designed to counter every known form of military strategy, had been defeated by the one thing it couldn't predict: complete unpredictability. Captain Minho Park floated in a rescue pod, his left arm in a makeshift sling and a grin on his face that somehow made his injuries look insignificant. His command ship had been destroyed in the final assault, when he had deliberately rammed it into Nexus Prime's main computer core, but he had somehow survived the explosion and been picked up by a passing rescue vessel. Admiral Vextal's shuttle docked with the rescue ship, and the alien commander found himself face to face with the human captain who had masterminded the impossible victory. Captain Park, Vextal said, his translator struggling with the mixture of respect and confusion in his voice. I must ask, how did your species develop such unique tactical doctrines? Minho laughed, wincing slightly as the movement aggravated his injuries. Admiral, humans have been fighting impossible odds since we learned to make fire. Every war, every battle, every time someone told us we couldn't win, we found a way to do it anyway. But the casualties, Vextal began. Were volunteers, Minho interrupted firmly. Every single one. We told them the odds. We explained that most of them probably wouldn't come back, and we still had more volunteers than we could use. The Admiral struggled to understand this concept. But why would they volunteer for certain death? Because someone had to, Minho replied simply. That's the thing about humans, Admiral. When we know the odds are impossible, we don't calculate our chances of survival. We calculate our chances of making it matter. The rescue ship's medical bay was filled with wounded humans, but instead of the despair one might expect after such a costly victory, there was something else in the air, a quiet satisfaction that came from having done something that everyone said couldn't be done. They had lost friends, suffered injuries, and destroyed most of their fleet, but they had won. Ambassador Hana Kim, who had watched the entire battle from the command vessel, transmitted a message back to Earth using the station's communication array. Mission accomplished. Nexus Prime destroyed. Casualties within acceptable parameters. The galaxy is safe, and they're finally starting to understand what humanity brings to the table. As the human fleet limped home, word of their victory spread throughout the galaxy at the speed of light. The story was told and retold each time with growing amazement. The primitive species that had been dismissed as newcomers had accomplished what the Cortan Empire with its 3,000 ships could not. They had succeeded where the Nexari Confederation's elite commandos had failed. They had done what the mighty Zephyrian war machines could not achieve, and in the depths of space other threats that had seemed insurmountable suddenly seemed a little less certain. The hegemony's other fortresses, their fleets of perfect warships, their armies of logical soldiers, all of it now seemed vulnerable to the one force in the galaxy that refused to follow the rules. Because now every species in the galaxy knew the truth. When the odds were suicidal, when victory seemed impossible, when every logical plan had failed, there was a species crazy enough to try anyway. A species that had turned chaos into a weapon and madness into a military doctrine, and somehow impossibly they kept winning.